Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to all of you, and a huge crowd, so we're really thankful for everyone who came. For those who don't know me, I'm Junaid. I teach Islamic and Middle Eastern history at the Department of History here in UIC. But I'm here more so in my other capacity, which is co-director of the Jewish Muslim Initiative. So before I hand it off to my co-director, let me tell you a little bit about the Jewish Muslim Initiative. Founded in 2005, the idea behind the initiative is to find points of cooperation and interaction between Jewish and Muslims on campus, especially students. This is often done through all sorts of public events and lectures, like the one we have here today, but also classes. So we've had classes, for example, on the medieval Mediterranean world in the past. We had a conference last spring on Jewish law and Islamic law in America. And we hope to have many other such events in the future. And in that vein, let me encourage everyone to sign up on the sign-up sheet in the front so you can continue to be apprised of our events. Our guests have had a busy few days, and they're going to have a busy night as well. So let me not say too much more. Let me hand it over to Rachel, my co-director, to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Professor Qadri. Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Haverlock from the Department of English and the co-director with Professor Qadri of the Jewish Muslim Initiative. Wonderful to see you all today, and it's a very exciting day for me because here I am at a juncture that many of us as researchers don't often reach. When you write about an organization and study what a group is doing, and suddenly you discover someone's doing it right. And in my own research on EcoPeace, Friends of the Earth Middle East, the representatives who are here with us today, I really discovered a very creative, refreshing, optimistic take and set of approaches to a perennially troubled area. I want to say, first of all, on the theme of water, you'll hear more from the directors when I turn it over to them, but they are here in the US, among other projects that you'll hear about. They're also here launching a faith-based campaign to gather support from Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities across the US and across the world to raise awareness about the Jordan River and water issues in the Middle East. As part of this project, I'm also happy to announce that our colleague, Professor Jahari Jabir from the Department of African American Studies, who's also a kind of ingenious musician, is putting on an event called Blues for Water, which will take place on Sunday, October 20th at 4 p.m. at the 6th Grace Presbyterian Church. And we'll put the flyer up there in the front if people want to know about it. Friends of the Earth Middle East EcoPeace is the only trilateral organization operating in the Middle East today. So these three wonderful individuals here with me today are the heads of very robust and active offices in Amman, in Bethlehem, and in Tel Aviv. And their approach is that something like water and its corollary waste knows no boundaries. And so these are issues that cannot be addressed exclusively through a nationalist prism or approach. So let me introduce each of the three. We have at the far left of the table Gidon Bromberg, who is an attorney by profession and previously worked in public interest environmental law He's a member of the Israel Bar Association and holds a Bachelor of Economics and a law degree from Monash University in Australia. As a fellow of the New Israel Fund, he completed a master's degree in international environmental law at American University in Washington, D.C., and has published over 20 academic and popular publications concerning Middle East environmental policy and water security issues. He is the head of the Tel Aviv office of Friends of the Earth Middle East. Munkit Meir, in the middle, received a degree in regional planning and architecture from the University of Louisiana, upon which he became the planning engineer for South Amman. He serves on the board of directors of both the Jordanian Sports Federation for the Handicapped and the Jordanian Royal Ecological Diving Society. He was awarded a medal from the Al Hussein Distinguished Giving for charitable activities. He is the co-founder of Friends of the Earth Middle East and also the founder and director of the Jordan Society for Sustainable Development. He organizes conferences, workshops, study tours, supervises regional research on shared ecosystems, and writes reports and policy papers on water, peace, and security issues. Nader Khatib served as chief engineer for the Bethlehem, Beit Jala, and Beit Sahur Water Authority from 1984 to 1993, as well as operations, where he did operations and maintenance of the distribution network. He received a Master of Science degree and then became the project manager for drainage and sewage. From 94 to 1997, Nader Khatib was a senior water resource engineer with the UNDP's Water Resources Action Program. He then became associated with the Palestinian Water Authority, coordinating a host of water and wastewater projects. In '98, he joined the newly established Water and Environmental Development Organization. He's carried out feasibility studies for USAID, worked with UNESCO. He holds a host of professional memberships, and not least is the director of the Bethlehem office. So again, you have before you the three directors of Friends of the Earth Middle East, who are all here with us in Chicago today. Please join me in welcoming them.
So thank you very, very much for that very, very warm welcome. We're delighted to be here at the university. We're delighted to be here in the beautiful city of Chicago. We enjoyed seeing the Chicago River flowing, not burning, as we'd heard in the past. We'd like to see the River Jordan flow one day as the Chicago River flows today. I'm going to briefly introduce, I don't need to tell you much more about our organization other than we're going to celebrate 20 years next year. We truly are the only regional organization that brings Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians together under one roof in any area, which is, I think, more than anything, disappointing that there isn't more. I wanted to start with Salam Alaikum and Shalom Aleichem. May peace be on us all in all our different faiths and cultural backgrounds that we come from. The work that we do speaks to two synergies, and it's taken us, we're 20 years old. The first 10 years was a real learning curve, and it's really only in the last 10 years where I think as an organization we've excelled, and it's because of this approach of top-down advocacy, but very uniquely moved forward. So a typical environment group writes a policy paper, researches an issue, but quite uniquely, when we research an issue, we'll bring a Jordanian, Palestinian, and Israeli expert together to do the common fact-finding, to answer the questions: why is the water body, why is the issue important? what's gone wrong? How do we get it right? And we come out with a single vision, be it for the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, our shared groundwater, climate change issues, striking an accord between Israel and Palestine on water. So we come with a single vision, and that's really quite unique. But even more importantly, it's the Jordan office that advocates that single vision in Arabic to the Judean government. It's the Palestine office that advocates that single vision in Arabic to the Palestinian government. And it's the Israeli office that advocates that single vision in Hebrew to the Israeli government. And that's the strength, that's the power of our organization. We are Jordanians, Palestinians, and Israelis speaking to our own government, demanding of our own government a change on the ground. The second way that we work is bottom-up. It's community-based, and we launched this effort about 13 years ago. I think Nada will go into great detail. But it's literally partnering communities on either side of these fake divides. Because the political borders speak nothing more than a compromise, an agreement that France and Britain struck during the First World War. And therefore, when we bring, that led to real results, of course, but when we bring communities together, we bring communities together on either side of shared water, where the divide is part of the problem. It's not part of the solution. And we try to overcome those problems by developing a common identity, irrespective of the border, based on the watershed. And that's another strength. And clearly there's the synergy between the two that create the set. So a few characteristics as to, what does it mean, water in the Middle East? Well, scarcity. You all know that water is scarce in the Middle East. Why? That's natural. There's nothing unusual about water scarcity. It simply doesn't rain very much. We have 8 months of the year where there's no rainfall. And that's not a disaster. That's the way it was meant to be. We need to live according to the limitations that nature have provided. Our water resources are shared. They cross, the water resources that we have cross at least more than one of the political borders that were drawn by someone else. We have competing demands between our countries, but also within our countries between the different sectors, and they often can be as equally significant. We have unequal distribution, partly because of geography. So the northern part of our countries have more water because of the geographic situation, but also very much to do with the politics. So in the Israeli-Palestinian case, very much to do with the continued occupation that has frozen an interim agreement that was supposed to end after 5 years to continue for 20 years. And finally, despite the scarcity, despite the interdependence, we're polluting. We're contaminating a large part of our shared waters. I want to, and here you can see a map of the shared water resources. Be it our focus is the Lower Jordan, from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea. The mountain aquifer is in the center, very much shared between the West Bank and Israel, and the coastal aquifer following the coast, shared between Israel and Gaza. So let me invite Munketh to tell you the story of one of our most famous rivers, the River Jordan.
He's good, huh? He's a lawyer. So, thank you, Gideon. It's really hard to talk after you. So, my name is Munketh Mahyar. I'm from Jordan. I'm a co-founder and a co-director of Friends of the Earth, like you heard in the beginning. Before I start, it's really great to be here. You bring back memories. For us who've been away from the campus life and all that, it's really great to be here. make use of it. I don't know if anybody told you, but you live the golden years. Make use of every day. We keep saying, if I only knew then what I know now. So make use of it, enjoy it. I just want to go back to the slide that Gidon finished with. Look at the region. This is a troubled region. You have an occupied Palestine, Israel, Jordan, and think of the region today. We have the Arab Spring, which is very clear and active in Egypt, and the tragic situation that Syria came to, which put a lot of pressure on neighboring countries like Jordan. We have about 1 million refugees already, that pressuring not only the economy but also the water resources. Somebody said 70% of the problems of the world will end if we can find a solution for the Middle East. So I need you to really remember that, once we are going ahead furthermore with the presentation. The Jordan River, we concentrate on the lower Jordan River, from that lake on top, the blue one, the small one, all the way down to the Dead Sea. Now, to the east, you see close to the lake that the Yarmouk River join the Jordan River, and that is a very unique area also. The river lost 96% of its water because of the conflict, because of the countries that they started to grab whatever they can. Why? Because they don't want their enemy to be empowered. If they let the water go down the river, their enemy will take it and they will be empowered more. No, I will take it even if I don't need it. But let's face it, everybody needs water in those days at least. So Israel diverted water through the national carrier from the north. Jordan built so many dams on the seasonal wadis that blocked the water to make it to the river. Palestine, of course, they are not really responsible for the demise of the river because they have no control of their water, their groundwater. A very, very little bit that used some of the water that from the catchment area. But Palestine today, they are insisting to be a part of the solution. We are working to rehabilitate the river, and Palestinians wants to be a major player in rehabilitation the river. Why? Because they are owners. They have ownership of the river. So it's a very strong political message to everybody that this is my river. From the green line, we call it the green line, you can see it over there, after the lake, all the way to the Dead Sea. And I want the river to find it the same way I left it, a healthy river. So that's why I want to be there. I want to be part of the rehabilitation. Now, Nader will be talking more about how our politicians look at water as a commodity, as an economic engine, something that I need to use to make benefits for the people. Us as an organization, yes, we are very much involved in environment and we care about the environment, we care about the situation of the river. The river lost 50% of its diversity. The other 50% is hanging on to this only 6% that keeps flowing, or 4% that keeps flowing, and it's polluted. And I think you will elaborate more on it. So, you see the river over there in that picture on the corner? That's the real river. In the mid of the 1800s, an admiral from the US Navy took the 5 boats and he went down the river from the Lake Tiberias all the way to the Dead Sea. And do you know that he lost one of his boats for the mightiness of the river? Seriously, he ended up with only 4 boats. but he recorded everything he saw. And in almost every page, you will see him describing this willow tree that is really flourishing in the valley. Willow tree you do not see today. It's gone. The power of the river also created or started the first hydropower station on the Jordan River, where the Jordan River and Yarmouk River meets. Benhas Rothenberg, the tall man over there, came from Russia under the British mandate and started what was called the Palestine Electric Company. And they built the hydropower factory. It's right down here. What they did is they blocked the Yarmouk River water, creating this massive lake over there, with the canal coming out and through the water gates, and these three pipes takes it to the turbines in the bottom and generate electricity. 40%? 40% of the region's need used to be generated in here from the electricity. Today, the Jordan River, like you don't always say, does not move a mouse wheel. It's really pathetic. Yeah. But the nice thing about this area also is that all this still there. They used to build really good concrete, the British, in those days, really. And the Bauhaus, this building over here, where we have the turbines, it's a Bauhaus, it's still there. Even the turbines itself, it's still there, 3 of them, all the way from Manchester, England, in a good condition. طبعا rusty, and you cannot really work it, but it's still there and can be turned into a beautiful museum or a first century modern industry museum. That picture in the bottom there, about 500 meters south of the factory here, you will find a place called Jisr al-Majama. In Arabic we call it Jisr al-Majama, the place of the bridges. In Hebrew they call it the Geisher. It's an area where you have 3 bridges, a Roman bridge, which you can see over there, and that bridge is 2,000 years old. Further down, you see the Ottoman bridge, where the railroad used to cross from Haifa to Damascus, a part of the Hijaz Railroad at that time. And in the middle, you cannot see it from this picture, used to be or there is a British mandate, concrete, ugly bridge. Really, it's the Roman and then the Ottoman is really great. So that tells you something about the river. The river used to be a cross place for all civilizations to meet. You know, since the Romans, we have the Beit Shan, Bisan, Decapolis city, and on the other side we have Pella in Jordan, and along with the 7 other cities over there. So this is a crossing place. It was never a border. We made it a border. Today you can see the river, how it looks like. Really, this is from the same place where you saw the boats in it. It's meant to be a fertile land, a land that can produce food and vegetables in a winter season where everything around it cannot produce anything. The climate over there is perfect for winter agriculture. Now all this, the demise of the Jordan River created another disaster, which is the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea been dropping in level by 1 meter every year. That's 3 feet every year. And going down in a way that it's not sustainable, like you see in 1931 all the way to 1993. what happened to the Dead Sea, and today it's even worse. Now the Dead Sea, the challenge of the Dead Sea is not only coming from the Jordan River, but also from the potash factories on both sides, in Jordan and Israel, in the south. Whatever left here is a evaporating ponds for the both potash factories, and they are responsible in about 30%, let's say, of the demise of the Dead Sea itself. So we cannot really think of the dropping of the water in the Dead Sea as something light, or maybe later on we can do something and bring back the water, because it's creating another ecological catastrophe called the sinkholes. I don't know how much you know about the sinkholes, but it depends. Sometimes it's the size of this room, sometimes it's the size 10 times this room, and overnight the ground will sink into the ground by 20 meters, 30 meters, God knows. What's on top of that land, we don't know. Is it a road, a house, a agricultural land, or a bare land? We don't know. So nature really can take revenge of its own, and we need to think about that carefully. And here are pictures of the Dead Sea. You can see how much the water we've been lost. It's really dramatic. And I will stop here, hand it over to my colleague Nader to tell you more about the region. Please, Nader.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. First, I want to thank the organizers of this event and for inviting us, and also like to thank you all for coming to listen and to share us some of the Middle East headache. Okay. Now, as a Palestinian water engineer, been involved in this issue for more than 30 years. There are lots of details, but I don't think I have the time to go through this. And as somebody, when Oslo was signed, was still struggling to establish the Palestinian Water Authority and connected to the negotiators and know lots of what is happening and faced lots of the suffering of the water supply. And also as a Palestinian refugee living in Bethlehem, been living all the consequences of this occupation and the water disasters. Now, everybody heard about Oslo. Maybe the good thing of Oslo is the creation of our organization. That's probably the only good thing I would say. In Oslo was not only about water, but there was one chapter called Article 40, which was intended, and the whole Oslo was thought to be 5 years, an interim agreement. Maybe it was good, I don't want to judge on the ones who did it, although from the first time I saw it, this arrangement, I said, this is disastrous for the Palestinians. Why? As you can see, all the water resources, they are shared. But Oslo first divided it, and it created a body called Joint Water Committee. And we've been under the mercy of this committee. What did that committee do? Maybe that was not the mandate, but that's how it practiced since that time. Its jurisdiction area was limited to the West Bank. The River Jordan was excluded, dealt only with the groundwater. So the water resources that are shared, most of the groundwater recharge takes place in the West Bank, lots of storage in Israel. So this Oslo gave Israel the right to extract as much as they can in the Green Line, and the Palestinians have no say in that. On the contrary, on the Palestinian side, every single project, water sanitation, must be approved by this committee, by consensus. If one person says no, it's the end. Today there are projects submitted 15 years ago to the Joint Water Committee, no answer until today. It's not a matter of money. There are donors, there are millions of dollars available, but the Joint Committee doesn't care. It's not only that. The Joint Committee within the West Bank, they are only, or their power limited to the areas, we call them A and B. Area A is like the urban areas where the Palestinians in principle should have both civil and security controls. Area B, I would say the rural areas, Israel is responsible for security. Then we have something called Area C, 61% of the West Bank where the Palestinian Authority has no say in it. If you get the permit for a project in Area C from the Joint Water Committee, you need to go to what is called the civil administration, the arm of the military, or defense of military, or military defense ministry in the West Bank. And that is another nightmare. There 12 or 13 bodies have to approve it. So you can imagine what is happening. Another example, because Gaza, everybody knows Gaza is a catastrophe. You know, in Oslo there was agreement to supply Gaza with 5 million cubic meters of fresh water, because Gaza today 95% of the natural water is unpotable water. And 2 weeks ago there was another agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis for an additional 5 million. But that water is not entering Gaza. Why? Because the Joint Water Committee until today could not agree on a pipeline of 170 meters to connect the Israeli system to the Palestinian system so the water can go in. So you can see the bureaucracy and the difficulties. And you know, this arrangement, first it failed the Palestinians in providing them enough water. Today, in terms of daily consumption per person, just to know the differences, the Palestinians' average consumption for domestic purposes 70 liters, compared to 300, 320 liters in Israel. 80% of this renewable groundwater is used by Israel. So how did Oslo fail both sides? For the Palestinians, by not giving and providing them enough water for their daily consumption and for economic development. And it is creating also sanitary problems. Wastewater is discharged without the treatment because of failure of this Joint Water Committee, which means water penetrating to the groundwater. It's diminishing or polluting, you know, those resources, which Israel also is tapping. At the same time, sewage is flowing from the West Bank, crossing the wall, entering to Israel. So the Israelis also are suffering from the pollution. And the Joint Water Committee, you know, still behaving the same. Now if you go to the West Bank, anywhere in the West Bank, especially in urban areas, there is no single house that enjoys running water for 24 hours from the municipal system. So when we get water once every week, I get water in Bethlehem once every 3 weeks, we have to store enough water in those tanks you see on the roofs, so we can have water for a certain period. But those tanks are also very dangerous. If you look to the kids, many cases, because somebody has to go to the top of the tank and watch in if it is full with water or not. Many cases, people will fall down. And broken leg, broken arm, many cases it happen. But also, not only that, if those tanks are not closed tightly, it will be natural to go look inside, find a dead pigeon, a dead bird, so it is unhealthy water. And there we also need cleaning between time to time. So the end result is like this: rivers of sewage, most of the water infiltrates to the groundwater, or it goes to the Mediterranean through Israel, through major towns of Israel, and both are suffering. Of course, also talk about water and sanitation, you talk about infrastructure, which requires lots of investment. And in the absence of a strong economy, you cannot achieve that. And if you build it, you cannot sustain it, because you need to operate and maintain it. As an organization, since 2001, we started with a project called Good Water Neighbors. That's the vision. We are neighbors, you know, we should live together in harmony, in dignity and peace, and work together. And here we started with 11 communities. Today we have 28 communities, all along the border. And those communities, they share a common problem, either a water or sanitation. And those people have learned that, you know, they cannot keep waiting until the politicians, until Saib and Sibelevni decide on a final peace agreement. They are paying the price. The kids are the ones who are drinking this polluted water. Those are the, who are living with the mosquitoes or with the smells of the sewage. And they decided to work together. In that, as Gideon was talking about, the bottom up, we work with the schools. We create what we call the environmental clubs, and some of those students who go to training and being advocates in their communities, today some of them, they are staff working with us. The ones who were 15 years old in 2001, they are 26 years. And they are the future leaders. And they've been learning really how to care about their water. It's not because, you know, I want to do a favor for Israel or they are doing favor for me. No. It's a self-interest, but the good thing, it is generating a mutual benefit. It is a win-win, not a win-lose as Oslo arrangements. And they are enjoying doing these things together. And when they get together, it will be difficult because we are all human beings. And you cannot say he's a Jew, he's a Muslim. We are all entitled to live in peace and dignity and harmony. And our water message and environment, we've been advocating it through the different faiths, with rabbis, with imams, and with the priests. Because water is a basic human right. Nobody can deny it. It goes beyond the politics, it goes beyond economics. Everybody must get a water. And the World Health Organization states that at least every human being needs daily 100 liters of water just to live a decent hygienic level, not to suffer from diseases. This is an example of the mayors who are leading those efforts, and because they work together, we have leveraged more than $400 million to be invested. And here they came also to the Jordan River in the last stretch of the fresh water, jumping into the water with no comments. You know, if you look this side, you know, this skinny person is Palestinian. The next one is a mayor in Beit Shean. The means, you know, it reflects how much water each is getting. One woman, not enough gender balance, but those people, you know, they've been the victims of drying up the Jordan River, because the water was diverted outside the basin, not for the benefit of the citizens in the valley. Here, just to show, you know, the Jordan River in this part, this is the end of the Jordan River. No fresh water is flowing down. What flows is this raw sewage, untreated, together with the brackish water. Here we are jumping in the river. You know, we've been criticized for raising a Palestinian flag on the Israeli side by some monitoring organizations in USA, but it shows we go beyond all those differences. We see that is the only way to do it. We should not act unilaterally. Environment knows no borders. And unless we do that, we all suffer. As a result of 10 years of advocacy, of working with media, pressure, the sewage now being withdrawn or stopped, or will be stopped, because in Israel, they are building a sewage treatment plant. In Jericho in Palestine, the Japanese are building another sewage treatment plant to stop sewage flow to the river. In Jordan, the US said. And for the first time since 1964, Israel, you know, started allowing, you know, symbolic amount of fresh water to go to the river. It will be 9 million cubic meters a year. Our request from Israel as a major diverter of the fresh water, 220, Syria 100, Jordan 90. That is the peace park which Montel was talking about. In Oja, for example, this is a well-known agricultural land in the West Bank. It depends on the spring, which can create this waterfall. But today, most of the year, that spring is dry. It flows probably from November to May. Why? Because the water has been captured upstream. But as a result of our work with the donors, we managed to get the permits or the approval from the Joint Water Committee to replace the distribution system, which saved about 50% of the water, which was lost, physical losses. And today, Oja gets 24 hours water. It's a small community. But it was Gideon who was, you know, chasing the Joint Water Committee, pushing for the permit, and also we secured a permit to drill a well. Those are the communities, the mayors, who really decided to continue. These are some of the photos. This is David Cameron before he was elected as a prime minister. He came, planted the tree, protesting against the war that will divide Wadi Fukin in Palestine from Tsur Hadassah. I don't think he still keeps the same political vision, But here he came. He did this before meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister and the Palestinian President. But these are the communities who put hands together, and in this particular site, until today, we stopped the war, based on hydrology and water. On another place is called Batir, we stopped it based on the cultural heritage, which goes on both sides of the Green Line. Today we have also to promote our activities, the training for the kids. We have 3 eco-centers, one in En-Gedi in Israel. This is in Oja. You see a recent photo. It's for tourists now. And the one down in Jordan. So people are welcome to come there, to research, to stay, to tour, to enjoy, the beauty of the Jordan Valley. Our work also, has been replicated to some extent in other parts of the world. In Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, India, even in the Balkans, and at this stage we are in discussion and with some donors also to transfer that kind of experience by bringing communities. But today also another reality emerged in the Middle East. The water is not a zero-sum game anymore. Desalination today is, creating a new tool for water. Israel today has a surplus water because of desalination. Israel today does not need the natural water of the West Bank. Israel today cannot say it is a zero-sum game. So politically, it's possible to give more water to the Palestinians. And I think I will stop here with the desalination figures. Gideon from Israel, he can talk about them. Thank you very much.
So one of the reasons, two reasons why we came here to the United States, and particularly to Washington, because we spent a week in Washington together with the Palestinian Minister of Water and Israeli Ambassador Oded Eran, to speak about solving the water issues now. And one of the game changers is, as Nada mentioned, is the combination of firstly treating wastewater, and Israel is the world leader in treating almost all of its wastewater and reusing that and making that available for agriculture, and massive desalination. Too much for our liking, but nevertheless today Israel is desalinating some 600 million cubic meters of water, 550 from the sea, another 50 from saline water springs, which means an increase in the Israeli water economy to 1 billion cubic meters, because we treat and reuse the wastewater that comes out of our domestic systems. So that what we've come and argued before and written a paper together before our own government and to the US administration, particularly Secretary of State Kerry, is that water is solvable today. There is no or little political cost in sharing water more fairly today, because sharing the natural water more fairly doesn't mean a cutback in the water supply for one of the sectors in Israel. So had we come to this issue 3 years ago, sharing water more fairly would have meant less water for Israeli farmers. Today that doesn't have to be the case because of the massive increase in the water economy. Moving forward on water today means more water in every Palestinian home. And that's a powerful, empowering political gain for the Palestinian president. Moving forward on water today has political gain for Israel. It creates the right incentive to stop sewage and deal with Palestinian sewage issues. It also gives credibility to the negotiation process, particularly to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who much of the world thinks is not credible. and is not serious about moving forward on the peace process. So it comes with high political gain for both sides at low political cost. There is no other issue of the 5 final status issues of the peace process that provide such an opportunity, and therefore it's an opportunity to change the whole structure. It's an opportunity to replace the Joint Water Committee with a new committee. Now, the Kerry team are currently already using the term a revitalised Joint Water Committee. We originally gave it a new name completely. The name doesn't matter. The jurisdiction has to be all shared water and not just one side of shared water. The principles need to be economic efficiency, social equity, equitable allocation, and of course it's not just dividing the cake between Israelis and Palestinians, it's also leaving something for nature, the very basis of all of our lives. So what we're coming and saying is that the way that we've dealt with the issues needs to be different. We need a paradigm shift, a shift that tells us it's not all or nothing, and that's been the way negotiations have been led for the last 20 years. There are some issues that can move forward today. Let's move them forward, not so that other issues don't, on the contrary, to help the other issues indeed to move forward, to create the very trust on the ground that we so desperately need. What we're also coming and saying is that although this handshake, and this is a handshake of over 30 years ago between Sadat of Egypt and Begin of Israel, is absolutely necessary, it's completely insufficient. Because there's nothing holding that handshake together. There's no foundation built. And this is the foundation. So the whole concept of peacemaking cannot remain just, and I don't belittle it, the negotiations between prime ministers and presidents. It requires tremendous investments in people-to-people trust building. And that's what we're one example of, but we need to have so many other examples of in the economic sector, in the health sector, education sector, you name it. And the second reason that we came is we want to rehabilitate the river, that the mayors are on the last clean stretch, but we can't do that alone either. Because we can bring a little bit of water back, and our efforts have done that. But in order to bring the full life of a river, not all the water, we're calling for less than a third of the historical flow in order to have a healthy river, and it's not us determining that, that's good science tells us that that's what the river needs. Well, we don't think it's just our river. We think it's your river too, because it's the River Jordan, and that's why we've launched this faith-based campaign that has literature that speaks from the respective holy books, from Islam, from Judaism, from Christianity, that all three of the Abrahamic faiths have identified tremendous importance to the river. And it's not only Jews and Christians and Muslims in our own part of the world, but all over the world. And therefore, and the secular world as well. We're not against seculars at all. But we want to we want you to share in this effort and help contribute. So this university or this department, we invite you to sign a covenant for the rehabilitation of the Jordan River, and you can do that on the website. There's a whole lot of information that we've produced, videos, PowerPoint presentations. We invite the students to research the issue of transboundary water, but in particular the Jordan River, and be part of educating yourselves and your community as to how the rehabilitation of the river can help not only the ecology, but build peace and build the ethic of living fairly between neighbors, but also with nature. We think that the Chicago River is just another reflection of the River Jordan that we can all identify with. So I think we're going to stop here. We're going to invite questions for another half hour or so, I believe, until 5:30. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, first join me in thanking the now we have time to expand and explore these topics through the question and answer. So, yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I applaud your efforts. I have some questions. One of you spoke about the paired communities, and I wasn't clear about what's the pair. Is it between two villages? Is one Israeli? Is one Palestinian? What are the pairs? That's the first one. And then you mentioned Wadi Fuqin. I have a friend that lives there who's still saying the sewage is running down the hill and ruining their agricultural lands, but I thought I heard you say it had been solved. So would you clarify that, please?
The question is to me. When we say pairs of communities, we talk about communities on both sides of the border, excluding the settlements. And if there is something called red line for the organization, is working or cooperating with the settlements. We do not work with the settlements. We monitor, we criticize. Wad Fuqin cooperates with Tsur Hadassah, which is inside the green line. They cooperate also against the sewage flow from Bitar Elid, the settlement that floods the fields of Wadi Fuqin. Yes, these are just west of Bethlehem. So those are the two communities. Okay, and now we work also with the other villages near Wadi Fuqin, Battir, Hussan. We stopped the wall through the court in Battir, which is next also to Wadi Fuqin, and also as an organization, we did fundraising for them through the World Bank to rehabilitate their water distribution system. So these, the green communities, they are the Jordanians, the red ones are the Palestinians, and the blue one are Israelis.
So physically they are in front of each other, separating them only the border. And as you know, the border is really no border over there, and it's as if it's both sides of the street. The irony is that they are so close in proximity, but they don't know much about each other. And the Good Water Neighbor project taught each community about the other community water reality. And that's how they became closer and started to help each other. The Wadi Fuqin, like you said, yes, they're still suffering from the settlement that is on the other side, not from the Tsur Hadassah. Yani Wadi Fuqin, the location is in the middle between Tsur Hadassah inside the Green Line and the settlements to the south of that. But today, the people of Tsur Hadassah are helping Wadi Fuqin and protesting against the settlement today, trying to help them to stop the water from flowing from
Just
the...
one remark to add. Now, the Palestinian and the Israeli communities, they are divided today by the separation wall. So physically, they cannot communicate and move. It's not free movement. And now we have a generation that doesn't know about the other side. They do not meet easily. They don't see each other. They are more divided. In some places like Battir, Wadi Fuqin, the wall is not being built, but the people of Wadi Fuqin cannot walk to Tsur Hadassah, which is just 5 minutes walk. They need to get a permit to go to Jerusalem and go back. It takes at least an hour by car.
Yes,
I just wondered whether, in terms of these paired communities that seem to make so much sense, whether you considered having international paired communities so that people in Chicago could try to organize to pair with one of these communities or similar.
So that's a lovely question, because we have written to the mayor of Chicago and invited him to come to an annual conference that we hold every year. This year it'll be held on the 13th and 14th of November. And if he was to agree, and maybe someone in the room can speak to him, we'd like to suggest that the mayor of Chicago, the city of Chicago, partner with our, not a single pair, but with the communities along the Jordan River. We'd like to create a sister relationship between Jordan River communities, Israeli-Palestinian and Jordanian, and the Chicago River. The Chicago River and its rehabilitation, and I still understand there are problems, is a lot better than the river burning, which we also understand. So the Jordan is still burning, not with water, but with sewage. And we think such a partnership, so international solidarity, international support by pairing communities is a very good approach, and we would welcome any continued further effort on that. So please, if someone can get us, the mayor, to respond to our invitation, we'd welcome that.
Mind you, Chicago is a twin city.
Okay, wait, excuse me, let's go in sequence. Just excuse me, let's just wait.
Mind you, Chicago is a twin city with Amman, the capital of Jordan, of course. On papers, there's nothing on.
I was going to say that if you paired the Jordan River with the Chicago River, you'll have to dye it green on St. Patrick's Day.
The Irish are welcome.
Well, we all know that water has been a serious problem for the region. Yet you said that water is solvable today. There is enough water that is being produced where it should not be a problem to share. You said that can be done despite the politics, but we know that politics ultimately governs what happens or what does not. There has been a lack of political will thus far in making that happen. And it is unlikely, although hopeful, that that will change. In the event there is no political will, what options do you have to bypass that and get the plan that you're talking about into effect?
I want to start with that. There's no option. There's no way to bypass political will. Your decisions are taken because of the creation of political will, or you stay in the status quo, a lack of leadership. So we don't see any other alternative than to continue to try and create that political will that's absolutely needed to move forward. And that's why we've come here. We're in our own countries, in Israel and Palestine, we're launching a public campaign, which will include some billboard efforts to speak to the urgency of the water issue and the solvability of the water issue. And of course there's going to be people that are going to object on both sides. There'll be Israelis that will object and say, well, why be kind, as of course nothing to do with kindness, why share fairly the water without getting something back? So the typical negotiating approach is, you'll be generous on water, and the other side will be generous on something else, on refugees, on land, on Jerusalem. So moving forward on water means no, you cut that dynamic. On the Palestinian side, the fear is, well, if we agree to move forward on water, maybe that will give Netanyahu credibility and he won't move forward on anything else. So here, it requires some international guarantee that moving forward on water doesn't mean not moving forward on Jerusalem. But maybe it's not done at the same moment. So, creating political will is absolutely necessary. We can't give up on that.
To sum that really is to think that politics of water is too important to be left with the politicians' hands, really. They are irresponsible, they cannot think that way.
It seems to me, though, that, of course, political will isn't just from the top down, it's also from the bottom up. So when the U.S. was getting ready to bomb Syria recently, there were many messages to representatives and many tweets, and just a huge expression from our population, and it became untenable. And then it became solvable, which was a good thing for the moment. So it seems that you're building some of the political will from the bottom up, but if you can't extend that a little deeper than the boundary of the river, well, then you might not have enough. But what are your plans, other than billboards, to get a kind of consensus from the bottom up in the region?
I think that answers what you mentioned, Yanni. We are launching a campaign that water cannot wait. There will be messages, different messages to the Israeli public, to the Israeli politicians, and different messages for the Palestinians, mainly the politicians, because the public, they are suffering from the water every day, and they will support an initiative. But also maybe something we did not mention it, because of this, the Joint Water Committee, it's complicating nowadays even the future of the negotiations, because the Joint Water Committee is bringing to the Palestinian Minister projects in settlements to approve them, and that will be used against even the Palestinian interest in negotiations, that the settlements recognized as illegal, but you legalize them by approving water projects. So the public, they are very supportive for the water. And on the Palestinian side, the minister was with us, he believes in this, but not everybody. And also here, we are coming here to lobby, to push, because if it is left only for the Palestinians and the Israelis, it will not be enough. And setting those dates, the administration committed itself to those 9 months, which means more pressure should be enforced, not to be pro-Palestinians or pro-Israelis, but I think we need to be pro-humanity.
And I think the issue is also resources. We're an NGO. We're dependent on donations. Donations sometimes from government, USAID or the European Union, but also donations from individuals. That's how we run our campaigns, run our effort. So the more support we can receive, the more bottom-up peace building, the more bottom-up political will we can help create. So we're in 28 communities. We could increase that by 10, but we're limited by financial resources. So that is a true limiting factor. And our campaign to go on billboards, we've raised specific funds. We can do it for 3 months. We don't have resources beyond that, but that's the best that we can do.
But that's why we are asking you to sign the covenant, and we go to churches, synagogues, and mosques, and that reflects that there is a lot more people is supporting this kind of initiative, and we depend on you also. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I come from the region. Actually, I'm from Turkey, and I've been there. I've been in this region as well, so I'm very happy to be here and hearing all these things. I was there like 8 years ago, and we were still discussing about the same thing in the project. But my question is about at the political level. So, because in terms of the political, state relations, the relationship between Israel and Jordan is different than the relationship between Israel and Palestine. So all these are different, but the problem is common. But does this difference in the relationship at the political level affect the decision that will be made for the joint solution? So what is the position for the Jordanian government in this situation? I think it's different than Israel, or is it different? So I guess you understand my question.
Well, you probably know the comedy Malcolm in the Middle. Jordan is in the middle.
Even on the table,
Even on the table. No, but I think the involvement of Jordan always gives credibility to both ends of the conflict. And we are trying to stand in the middle somehow. We are in good relations with Israel, and we are in very close relations with the Palestinians. And in a way, you cannot really separate them from each other. We try to build the trust between them by being there, okay? And especially for radical groups, that they do not want the Palestinians and the Israelis to come closer together. So the presence of the Jordanians in the middle will strengthen the negotiators to come even closer. But also we are part of the region. And we want the region to end the conflict because we can see the lost opportunities that is really suffering the whole region from. We enjoyed a few years in the very beginning when we start talking in 1994 to 1996, and also during Camp David, even it was only negotiations, but we can tell that the region flourished somehow, and more people started to come. Remember, it's a region that enjoys archaeology, religion, excellent weather, excellent natural resources. The Dead Sea by itself is a safe haven for a lot of people who seek treatment in the waters of the Dead Sea. So all these are lost opportunities for the Jordanians, and we make sure that hopefully one day we will be able to push the region to the peace that we are looking for.
If you allow me, first, the West Bank was part of Jordan until '67. And the Palestinian share from the Jordan River Basin, which was negotiated between the Arab countries and Israel, especially in the 50s, the Palestinian share was included with the Jordan. And when Jordan signed the agreement with Israel, it was taken out so that the Palestinians would negotiate. And also, the Jordan River Basin is shared, by 5 countries. Jordan is a riparian, so a final regional arrangement has to include all those countries. For the lower Jordan, we talk about Palestine, Israel, Jordan, but in the future, we need still to think about Syria and Lebanon because it is one basin. On the other side, the mountain aquifer, it is unilateral, it's bilateral Palestinian-Israeli, where they have to work the formula together how to share it. Turkey has been also a major player in the water. Recently, Turkey was suggesting to pipe water from Turkey to Gaza, floating pipeline. There were also plans to bring water from Sehan and Jihan to the Middle East, but the economics of desalination today made it much cheaper than, the filling stations. We know in Turkey what happened, and the Medusa bags, all those things, okay? And I am, as a water engineer, I am a graduate of Turkey, so that is another added value for Turkey.
So this is a technical question. I didn't quite understand. It sounded like desalination has helped solve the problem of quantity, but you said that it also has brought about other problems. So is that the way to go, or is there another alternative? If it keeps going that way, is it going to create other issues?
So, desalination based on the burning of fossil fuels is problematic. And even though, the membrane technologies have advanced to such a state that, the price of desalination has dropped tremendously, as long as we continue to burn fossil fuels, and that's what we're doing, we're concerned that the solution be seen just as a technological fix. The region could never sustain the population that it has with its natural waters. This region was not meant to have 20 million people. There simply isn't enough water resources to sustain it. So there is a need for new water. We're not against desalination as a technology. It can be part of the solution. Treating wastewater has to be part of that solution as well. But we could go much further, and we did a study that speaks to about 1 billion cubic meters of water, which is this addition from desal and treatment, that we could still conserve and better utilize today beyond desalination. And one good example is flushing our toilet. We flush the toilet the way you flush the toilet. with drinking water. You shouldn't be doing it, and we shouldn't be doing it. We should be using grey water, the water that we shower with. About a third of every one of us use, about a third of the water that every one of us use every single day is in the shower. We could be capturing that grey water, treating it very lightly, and using it to flush the toilet, which is the other third of the water that we use every day. We would save a third of our water consumption. And then there's other options of waterless toilets, depending on the type of environment we're living in. Certainly for single story homes. So that there's a lot more that we can do. Desalination is part of the solution, but it shouldn't be the only part. We should be using our water much more wisely. We shouldn't be growing tropical fruits in the middle of the desert. And we do that in Israel, in Jordan, even in Palestine. Where water is far more scarce, there are private owners of wells that grow bananas in the middle of the desert because they don't pay for the water, and bananas pay a lot.
Well,
So
agriculture in general needs to be looked upon and call on reform of the sector itself. When you use over 70% of your water resources to agriculture, and you are in a scarce or dry region, why? Why do we insist to grow wheat? Saudi Arabia, probably you heard that they tried to grow wheat for many, many years in the north of the kingdom, costing like 3-4 times the cost of wheat international, and losing a lot of water. It's the same thing in the Jordan Valley, like Gidon said. We really put too much water in agriculture that we really need to look into the reform of the sector itself. Yes.
What about reforestation? Because you were saying that there was a natural given of rainfall in the area, but that wasn't quite true. There's been since antiquity, huge deforestation in the headwaters of the Jordan River. And if you deforest, you lose more than half the rain because the forest gives a lot of the rain, and then you get high evaporation with the heat when the sun hits the ground. So what about reforesting in some areas to increase the rainfall?
So I think there are two issues here, and we're not about blame games in our organisation, and where credit is due. Israel is the world leader in reforestation of any country on this planet. There's been more trees planted per size of country in Israel than anywhere else in the world. And when you travel through the Galilee, when you travel even down to the Negev, you see forest again. Now, there were lessons learned. They planted the same tree. They created sort of green desert, so it didn't provide the biodiversity needed, but it did very much assist in groundwater recharge, because that's what forests do. They slow down the water and they enable it to percolate. But then the bigger problem is climate change, because it's climate change that is leading to less, not necessarily less precipitation, but greater days of dry days during the winter, the rainy season, and warm days in between that reduce percolation of the rainwater. So we see more floods. We see days of heavy floods, and then several days of very hot days, and then some more floods. So that decreases groundwater recharge, and that is your problem. I mean, it's the United States, it's China, it's Europe that is largely responsible for climate change globally, and in the marginal parts of the world that we live in, we're feeling those impacts first. So we need to work together.
And for that, we have a project that we are working on called the carbon footprint. Like in our eco parks, we encourage people who travel, who do a lot of traveling, so they can travel with a clear conscience, to pay a little bit of money so we can plant trees. So this is the idea, like something like $10 per tree, and if you are paying $1,000 to come to America, $10 is nothing. And that's what we try to do, yani. We try to cover the carbon footsteps of the Americans even.
I think, just to add a little bit, because it's not the same story when it comes to Palestine, because reforestation will help protecting the soil and prevent further erosion, help recharge in mountainous areas. As I said, West Bank, 61% is area C, so we cannot go on large scales in reforestation or preparing that land. There are also problems in that area. We are not free as Palestinians. We are prohibited from doing large scale, and there is lots of uprooting of trees, on daily basis you hear that.
Security reasons.
It's the clashes, all the time, mainly with settlers, burning olive trees, uprooting, so it's going. But we like, and there was a program, funded by UNDP to plant or called Green Palestine. It's not being done as supposed because we are limited. And if we go with massive reforestation, in many cases, those trees are on the second day, they are taken out by the settlements or, by military because of accusations of security, these things. So it's not as easy. The other thing, climate change, and I think, still up till today, the United States did not recognize it officially and sign the Kyoto and after things. So still there is a big debate whether it is a reality or not. So to blame, Palestine, Israel for burning of little fuel to provide more water, we are concerned in general, but we are not adding much, it's just simple. Probably the global change, that is the only thing where the Palestinians and the Israelis are not blamed for.
But to be fair, really, I've witnessed a number of major U.S. cities that are really aiming for zero carbon emissions, like Austin, Texas, and I was there like 5 years ago, and they had some really good programs, I hope that it's all over, yeah.
I heard you speak a couple of years ago when Gidon was over and your colleagues weren't with you. It seems to me, as people organizing an NGO and trying to keep it going, has technology, for lack of a better word, been the game changer? Has desalinization, which has really seemed to have taken off in the last 2 or 3 years, is that if you didn't have desalinization today, how much more difficult would your job be?
A lot more difficult, I would say.
I think, my first experience or debate with an Israeli expert refers back to '89, where I would talk about Palestinian water rights or fair share of water, and he will insist it is a zero-sum game. The cake is not enough. We need to get a bigger cake. Today, because at that time desalination was much higher than it is today, but more expensive. Today, we hear Israeli officials, officials saying Israel has a surplus of water because of desalination. Every cubic meter, it adds to your budget 1.8, because 80% of this 1 cubic meter becomes wastewater. You treat it and give it to the agriculture. So Israel's water economy has increased by $1 billion, which means no more dependence on the natural resources of the West Bank. No sector will be affected if Israel decides to give up part of that water. Israel is still desalinating, heading towards 800, 850 even. And also within the Israeli water strategy, there is a figure mentioned for 2040, 430 million cubic meters for neighboring countries. And Israel is offering to sell that water.
Yani, in a way, I would say as an organization, we look at desalination to be the last option. But with the new technologies and becoming cheaper and even using gas instead of heavy oil is even better. And we're calling for renewable energies to be involved here. And renewable energy, especially solar energy, could be very popular in our region. You are talking about a region which enjoys 320 days of sunshine, almost all year around. And we need to invest a bit more. And if you really look into renewable energies, it's becoming almost as much in cost as the conventional energy. If you lift the subsidization of the conventional energy, they will come head to head. And you can say that in new technology, in solar energy, and in methods of desalination can make it possible.
So we have time. Maybe we'll just take these next two questions. I want to tell everyone there's a reception afterwards in the back of the Institute for the Humanities, so you might have a chance for some more informal conversation. So, yes, sir?
One thing I thought was missing from what I heard, there's a huge canal built by Israel many years ago from south of the Tiberias throughout the down south way down. From what I don't have any numbers to give, but it looks like it is at least 2 or 3 or 4 times as big as River Jordan itself ever was. Now most of it, or a good part of it, is open air, and a lot of evaporation takes place, 320 days of sunshine.
Yeah.
What impact does this have on what you have discussed today?
So Nada actually mentioned the project. It's the National Water Carrier, or maybe you mentioned as well. The National Water Carrier in its peak pumped 450 million cubic meters of water out of the Sea of Galilee. And that largely accounts for Israel taking half of the waters of the Sea of Galilee, with Syria and Jordan taking the other half. Because, the whole system was built on moving water from the north, where the Sea of Galilee is, and bring it to the coastal cities, and even onto agriculture in the Negev. The whole water economy has changed, and that's because of desalination. Desalination takes place along the Mediterranean coast, and there's already been a massive reduction of the amount of water that is pumped out of the National Water Carrier, and it's mostly covered. There's only a small stretch. I don't know whether when you were in the region, but there's a small stretch that's open, and for the most part, from the Galilee south, it's all in a pipeline. But in any event, that is reduced tremendously because of desalination. And one of the advantages of desalination is that the water is desalinated right next to the cities. So you don't need to be moving waters like you did in the past. We would like to think that it's just because of our effort that water's flowing into the Jordan. And had we not been the main lobbyists, it wouldn't have happened. But it's also due to the reduction in pumping out of the Sea of Galilee that's allowed the lake to rise. We also had a good winter last year that allowed the lake to rise. But by reducing the pumping, the water level of the lake is much healthier, and it can flow to the Jordan again.
Yani, I can say it was a part of the Israeli propaganda at those days to make the desert bloom and attract more people to the country, to the new country, let's say. But like other projects, yani, if you think of El Hola, okay, that little lake before Tiberias, people started to play with nature and they dried it up to turn it into an agriculture fields. It failed. It started to give gases and all that. So they brought back the water, but they changed it to be a bird sanctuary instead of a water reservoir. And it's really making much more money than keeping the water in it as a reservoir. Over 700,000 people visit the bird watchers visit El Hola, and about 70% of them from outside Israel even. So you can imagine the potential, the economic potential that comes there. But Israel now, they are not really after to bloom the desert. Thank you very much, Yanni, for that.
Oh, they're still.
Yeah.
But with treated wastewater.
Yeah, but treated wastewater is different.
You
Yes.
mentioned
Oh, that's just that we're running very short. Let me just take the last question. We'll have more time
We can talk
formally
at
at the end. Yes.
Oh, my question was more one of curiosity. I'm just wondering how in Jordan they deal with the water problem with 1 million refugees suddenly on your borders with such a limited water supply.
Well, it's difficult, of course, but we are used to that. Yeah. We've been receiving refugees since 1948, of course, with the Palestinians being part of us, you know, like the refugees, but it impacted the thing. But also in the Gulf War, we received Iraqis before, and the difference that they came with money. The Syrians, they are poor population really that came to Jordan, and they are leaving a huge impact on the economy. In the last report I read that Jordan only received 30% of the cost of having the refugees on its land right now. Now, last year we did receive some aid. Israel pumped, I don't know how many millions, 3 million cubic meters, a bit more, you know, to help in the Syrian refugees crisis over there. Luckily, in Jordan, this year we received the DC water. The DC water is an aquifer between Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and during the last 4 years we were building the pipe to bring it and to be relaxed a bit in Amman to receive the water like 2 or 3 times a week instead of 1. But here comes the Syrians and we cannot enjoy that anymore. But luckily we do have the water to sustain at least. It's a difficult situation, I must say.
So if you would, after we finish, if we can let Nader and Munkit and Gidon arrive at the reception, they certainly deserve a little repast and certainly some Chicago water. So if you just let them pass, and then we'll have some time to speak. But please join me now in thanking them so much for
First slide, Lee. Thanks, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Leon.
Yes, a pleasure. Thank you.